Hi all, and welcome to the very first video on my new channel, which is going to be called Insights Into. Today marks the 15th of December, and it will be the first video that I ever make on YouTube, to be perfectly honest. And I guess let me tell you a little bit about what I want to do on this channel. So, I think I know a little bit about a lot of different things. I'm a bit of a generalist and haven't really found my niche or specialty in any given area in society. Um, but I was hoping that I could use that as an advantage and actually speak a little bit about a lot of different things and provide some insight on a lot of different areas and obviously explore myself into a number of different areas and new areas, which could be really interesting. So the way I want to run this channel is each video will have a topic, and each topic will be voted by any potential viewers that I potentially get, and that will be through the top comment in the comment section. So we'll do this on YouTube for now. I'm sure, given how terrible YouTube comments is, once you can't find comments, we'll find a different solution. But that I imagine will not be an issue on my first video. So let's see how we get on. But let's whack the comments, topics in the comments section, and let's keep it safe for work for now. I don't have any other parameters for the moment. I'm sure, again, if this garners any interest, we'll have to put a few more rules around, but let's see how we get on. Again, I feel like I have a knowledge in a few different areas, so hopefully I can provide some insights into different places. And to be honest, I'm doing this as much for myself, given I have no audience and no viewers as it stands, to do something creative and productive, as I am for any potential viewers' entertainment. I think at the moment I'm having somewhat of what you might call an existential crisis, but that seems a bit extreme. I work in a corporate job and don't particularly find satisfaction in that on a day-to-day basis. So I'm hoping that my lack of, I guess, self-drive to find something interesting will be, I guess, replaced by someone else's interesting topic, and they will be able to tell me what uh, might be interesting for me, and I'll find something through that. So that's kind of why I'm doing it. Hopefully, it'll take us to some interesting places, and I guess we'll see how we get on. I realise I've left the footnotes from the future slide on this slide, and I can't bother to redo that whole bit. So I guess you can maybe tell what today's topic is going to be. I'll probably put it in the title anyway. But the way I figured out today's topic was through a one random word generator. So because I got no viewers and no comments, I thought we'd go into a random word generator and find something to talk about today. And today's topic is gratitude. I thought it might actually be, I don't know, gratitude's quite intangible. It's not something you can look at or hold, so it's a bit of an interesting thing for a topic area of discussion. But I've done my best. I've come up with hopefully some semi-interesting points, but maybe you guys will find something that you are actually interested in. I'm not sure anyone would have put gratitude as their top item on the comment section, but let's figure that out as we get on. So gratitude it is for today. What is? Oh, there you go. I'm grateful for the footnotes, but what is the origin of the word gratitude? It comes from the Latin gratus, meaning thankful or pleasing, and again, meaning thankfulness, and was um, sort of coined in the mid 1500s. From limited research, I've found that maybe we needed to put into words how we reciprocate with each other in society and how we are thankful for that reciprocity. And I think gratitude neatly sums it up rather than saying I'm thankful, I'm thankful. I think gratitude, as we'll get into, it can be sort of an emotion, a feeling, or otherwise, but I think that feeling needed to be summed up by something, and rather than saying thankfulness, we're saying gratitude. I think my initial reactions when hearing the word gratitude are definitely, not unfortunately, but I think the word definitely has some religious connotations. So I do think of Christianity, and growing up in the UK and in a British school, there was often the sense that you should be grateful for everything that was sort of taught in Christian schools. So um, and obviously grateful to God and Jesus Christ. But that was my first reaction. But then I think there's a lot more to explore than just that initial reaction on the concept of gratitude. So if we move on, yes, philosophy. I think trying to understand a lot of things from a philosophical perspective helps you really get to the root cause of everything. I'm sort of a believer in the fact that philosophy is the foundation of all other um, walks of life and fields of expertise. I think it grounds everything. There is a philosophy of pretty much anything, which can be somewhat defunct or non-purposeful in some cases. But I think in a lot of cases it is really interesting to peel back a layer of any given topic and try to understand what it means. And usually there's a entry on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So in this case, that definitely was today. So what is sort of the philosophy of gratitude? What does it mean to be not gratuitous? What does it mean to be grateful? Is the correct word in this case. And what philosophy tends to say about it is that it seems to require two entities. Obviously, the person who is grateful and the thing, person, action, item, event that is causing this person to be grateful. Um, and I think that makes sense on the surface. However, when reading up, there was some disagreement on what conditions need to be met in order for someone to be grateful. I think the consensus view, which I'm not sure I agree with, was that the thing causing the gratefulness onto someone must be an agent. Therefore, they must have agency, be sort of conscious in this effort. Um, there must be an action involved. There should, I think, sort of some change of state or change of environment leading to uh, the gratefulness to arise, and that action must be intentional insofar as it should the agent doing the action must have the intention of making someone grateful, which I think is a lot of conditions for something that maybe doesn't need all that. I'm not sure that just being grateful requires someone else to want you to be grateful for the thing that you do. I think that's definitely not a simplification, but a restriction on what it means to be grateful. And I will dive into that in a bit more detail in a bit. But there's also a big question around whether you should be grateful for something that someone was obligated for you to do anyway. So if, say, for example, um, I don't know, I lent my friend £20, and I think the obligation there is that they pay me back that £20. Should I be grateful when they give that £20 back to me? I think it's an interesting question, and I I think that again, not allowing the situation where you can be grateful for something that someone was obligated for you to do anyway is an over restriction on what it means to be grateful. I think I would be grateful if someone gave me back that £20. I think I'd be grateful for the trust and relationship I have with that person, that I can give them £20 and they would give me it back, and vice versa, and we can depend on each other. I think there's something greater there than just, oh, someone was obligated to give that back to me anyway. But it'd be interesting to hear anyone's thoughts on that below as well. How is it viewed today? Again, one of my initial thoughts when hearing the word gratitude is often the implication or sentiment that younger generations, well, I think the sentiment from older generations that younger generations aren't grateful for the world they've built for them and everything that's been provided. Again, I'm not sure about that one. Uh, I do think that in a lot of ways, older generations have, in as fewer words, destroyed a lot of the future that future generations might anticipate, and that's, well, for me anyway, creates a lot of existential dread. I don't know what other people think. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I mean, the obvious ones are the destruction of the environment. Nowadays, there's definitely the sort of sense that you are, um, I think, well, for me personally, the way that the capitalist society is set up, I'm not saying that capitalism is inherently bad, but the way capitalist society is set up is making things just more and more expensive and more difficult to get a foothold in something that's supposed to be meritocratic and benefit those who actually work the hardest and should be rewarded for that. I really don't think that's the case. I think the scope for just fulfilling your potential is a lot less because of all the restrictions and concentration of wealth amongst the higher echelons and I think older people in society. So, not to get all soapboxy, which that has got, but that was my first impression when I heard the word gratitude. Um, I'm sure some people agree, so let me know in the comments. But despite that, I do think there is definitely something to be said about being grateful for things, especially when you were born into a privileged situation or if you're in perfect health. I think that's something to be grateful for example. So I think there is definitely something to be said about being grateful. I think I'm going to jump to my last point here, but because I do think that being grateful in and of itself often elicits empathy and compassion because I, th- I think often it's a sense of there's something outside of your control that you are thankful for or happy that exists or does something, and you sort of have to. Yeah, I think you're recognizing and not taking that for granted, and especially when a person does something that you are grateful of, it creates that level of empathy where you put yourself in their shoes and imagine yourself um, doing the activity that they've done to make you feel grateful, and that really creates a sense of empathy and putting yourself in other people's shoes. And I really think compassion and empathy creates a greater society where we're not all atomized and individualistic. And I think we should be practicing gratitude more to lead to that more compassionate society. And I don't think that there is enough of that, not necessarily from younger people, but just from people in entitled positions, in position of privilege and power. There's a lot of things that are taken for granted, especially in our Western quote unquote liberal democracies, and maybe it's worth everyone taking a step back and trying to understand what it means to be grateful for anything, just the situation that you find yourself in. There must be something that you can feel grateful for, especially within the spheres that I just mentioned. Cool. So I've done a pros and cons list about gratitude. I don't know whether this structure makes any sense, but I think for any topic, you can probably find a pros and a cons for what it is. So, pros of gratitude. I think gratitude is a happy emotion to feel when you are feeling grateful. It is probably a good thing, therefore. That's my opinion. Uh, to practice gratitude, to practice empathy, as we talked about, and I think being empathetic to other people helps create a better society. If you're grateful about something, that means something good has happened somewhere. I think just potentially inherently if someone is happy something's happened, that means something good has happened. Uh, Reflecting on that, people, I'm sure, could be grateful for something that is a net negative to other people. Not that I'm a utilitarian myself, but to frame it in that perspective, it potentially means that if I'm grateful for something, but it's had a really bad impact on someone else, it might not actually be a good thing. So reflecting on that, I'm not sure that's strictly true, but there's a probability that something good has happened. Let's frame it that way. And then the cons about gratitude. Uh, yeah, that's a confusing one, that top one. But going back to that philosophical restriction of should you feel gratitude when someone has done something they're obliged to do, I'm just flipping that on its head. I think a lot of the time, and again, moving back towards the sort of religious connotations around the word, there is often an obligate, and I think the young old generation dynamic that we were talking about earlier. I do think there's an obligation to be grateful sometimes when maybe there isn't, and people say, "Oh, you should be grateful. You should be grateful," but that situation to be grateful doesn't always exist. And again, going to that second point, I don't know whether my pessimism is just growing, but it feels like there's less and less to be grateful for every day. Uh, the political situation, the environmental situation, the economic situation of the UK where I am and the world in general. I don't know whether it's just how media is portraying it, but I don't think it is. So you can feel it in just how people are talking, speaking, feeling in the air. I don't know, but it feels like people are finding less and less things to be grateful for every day, and potentially with reason, which is of course a con. It seems like a simplistic way to frame it, but it's a con. And then, but I guess still flipping that back on its head, not enough people are grateful for the things they should be grateful for. So going back to that thing about people in positions of power, people who are entitled, they're not grateful for things they should be grateful for. And I think that really has a big impact on society, because if people in those positions would just stop and take a second and think about all the things that they're currently taking for granted and how they got to the position that they are today, myself included, I think they would be more empathetic to those who didn't have the same advantages that they did growing up and even to this day, and potentially think about them when decision making. And if everyone did that, we would hopefully take each other into account a lot more. But not enough people are doing that, and that is a con. So what's the final verdict on gratitude? I would recommend gratitude. I think it's something that we should try practice every day, and not just because, for example, the church says it. I think in and of itself, it's probably not probably. I think it is a good thing, and it leads more people to be more empathetic, which connects us, makes us understand things from other people's point of view, and I think if more people were more grateful more of the time, it leads to better society. I know I've said that, but that is my final verdict, having thought about this for a while. But I'd love to know your thoughts on gratitude. Please put them in the comment section, along with your topic for conversation for the next video. It might just be, if you comment, it will be the next video, because again, I don't have any viewers. So if you want to hear about something, this is your opportunity to hear about it. Get someone else to do the hard work for you, and feel free to like, subscribe alongside those comments. I'm sure that will help in some capacity, if not just for my dopamine receptors. So if you have taken the time to watch this, I appreciate it, and hopefully see you in the next one.